Okay, let's see if this works. All right. So this is basically I'm gonna take all that stuff I do to review the stuff that I went over last week. Right, every lab, the first 30 minutes is just designated for review. I'm not gonna do that this Friday because we have a professor coming in. He's gonna talk about some plants, and if I do the review on top of that, we're gonna run overtime. I've already tried it. We ran overtime twice, so I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna put this on YouTube or wherever, and the Friday people can take a look at it and listen to the review, and then they can come to class and everything will run smooth. Okay? All right. So what do I want to say? Um, Actually, you know what? By the way, if this ends up being good, if you like this idea, I might try to do this more often. Maybe do more videos. So just give me some feedback on what you think about this. Okay, so the review of last week's material. I'm going to put this into two halves. The first half is going to be mosses and liverworts and everything else in the second half. I just want you to, I don't want too much information to be packed into one video so you can sit back and digest it, all right? Just like I do my reviews, just like I do my lectures. Okay, so all of last week's material basically revolved around understanding how plants ended up conquering land. Right? All these progressive adaptations that got plants from the water onto land. And there are a couple of charts on your lab notebooks and also in the slides that you want to look over. They have all these adaptations. I'm not going to go over all of them. You should already have that filled out, and I checked those off anyways. So just refer to those. I'll touch up on some of those as I go through all these different groups of plants. But the main thing I want to do is help you identify the plants and then go over some things about their lifestyle and then about their basic biology. Okay. Okie dokie. So the first thing I want to do is go over the life cycle, the alternation of generations of all these plants. I'm just going to go over the main schematic. We've done this every single lab section, every single review since we've started the sea fern lab. I've gone over this just to drill it into your head. Memorize this because every plant will undergo this kind of life cycle. Maybe there's a few tweaks here and there, but to have the scaffold down pat, you can always go back to refer to that. It's just super important, right? So let's do it. So let's start with the gametophyte, and then the sporophyte, S phyte. Remember, the phyte designation, whatever comes before that phyte is what that plant makes. So the gametophyte makes gametes, the sporophyte makes spores. Sporophyte's 2N, gametophyte is 1N. Gametophyte makes eggs and sperm. All right, and the sporophyte makes spores. 1N, 1N. Both these parent plants make 1N single cells. That might be a little confusing. Just remember how they're made. They're made differently, right? So the gametophytes, they make these gametes. The gametophyte itself, the parent cell or the parent plant, is 1N. And the eggs and sperm are also 1N, right? The sex cells are 1N. That means to make these sex cells, they're undergoing mitosis. You're basically taking this parent cell, one of the 1N cells in its body, and it's mitosing that, splitting up into two, and making these specialized sex cells out of the body cell. Nothing special changes the morphology of the cell itself. It's still just mitosis. Okay. The eggs and the sperm meet up. They make a zygote, which is 2N. That zygote grows and grows and grows and grows, doing just regular mitosis, and it eventually develops into a mature sporophyte. Remember, the sporophyte makes spores, but the sporophyte is 2N, makes 1N spores, so it undergoes meiosis here. Meiosis. Always hard to spell meiosis. Okay, and so you have these spores. Now these spores then germinate. They find a nice moist place to germinate. They break open, and then what comes out undergoes mitosis just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows and makes a mature gametophyte. Just remember this entire schematic. Just remember it. Get it into your memory. Okay? Beautiful. So today we're going to talk about seedless non-vascular plants. This is the first part of this video diary that I'm going to go over. Okay. Seedless vascular plants come in two flavors. You got the moss and liverworts. Again, we already went over this. Just refreshing your memory. Okie dokie. Just a couple of unifying features that these guys all have. Number one, the gametophyte is the dominant plant. Remember, it's really important to know which of the two, the gametophyte or the sporophyte, dominates in the life cycles of these different plants. Here it's the gametophyte. In every other plant we'll look at in the future, so all the vascularized plants, they're all sporophyte dominant. The sporophyte on these guys actually is dependent on the female gametophyte. For nutrition and water. So it basically juts out of the female gametophyte. And we'll get into that as we get into the life cycles of them. And finally, just as a last fact, they're non-vascular. Right? That means they don't have the specialized vascularity to transport water back and forth. That means a couple of things. Number one, they don't have roots. No roots. So in order to get water, they basically have to be rained on. Okay, they absorb water from the surfaces of their tissue. Right, no roots. Number two, there's no lignin. So in these specialized vascular cells in the vascular plants, the tracheids and the vessel elements, the cell walls of these cells are made out of lignin, or reinforced rather by lignin. And this reinforcement kind of allows these cells to grow upwards so you can have taller plants. You can see the mosses and the liverworts, they grow really, really close to the ground. As you've seen this in lab, right? The mosses stay low, the liverworts stay low. Okay. Also, another thing to note, because they don't have roots and because they have to absorb water from their surfaces, again, these guys are less adapted to being completely terrestrial. You see, as we go further on from the mosses and the liverworts into the ferns, and then finally into the seeded plants, every step forward gets you closer and closer to true terrestriality. Terrestrialness, I don't know how to say it. Okay, so let's quickly go over the liverworts. Liverworts. Easy to identify. They look like elephant ears, ribbons, whatever you want to call it. Just flat, fleshy, thin layers. These lobes on top of the ground. These are called thalluses or thalli. And if you recall, a lot of them have these little cups called gemmae on them. Right. Thallus, again, gametophyte. Right. This is the dominant form of this taxa. And if you remember, you actually look at the thalluses under the microscope, you'll see they have all these individual units with pores, and these pores don't close. So they don't have stomata. So if you remember what stomata are, they are these pores that allow CO2 in for fixation, but they have these guard cells around them. These guard cells are like bent, right? They're curved. When they dry out, when there's less water available, they turn straight. They shut this hole up. They close this hole, and so when it's dry, they don't lose more water to the environment, right? You can imagine that you have this hole completely open, connecting the inside of the plant to the outside. It'll constantly lose water through evaporation. So the liverworts are maybe the least adapted for survival away from water. In the mosses and all the vascularized plants, they do have stomata. So remember that. Okay, no stomata in liverworts. Bam, bam. Okay, awesome. Going back to the gemme, right? Those little cups on the phalluses. What these are, remember, you get water into them. If it gets rained on hard enough, they just pop right off. When they pop off, they develop into another thallus. So this is budding. This is budding reproduction. There's asexual reproduction. It's just making more of the gametophyte, making more thallus material. Okay. When these gametophytes do want to sexually reproduce, they form these reproductive structures in the male and the female. So you have the male, female. And on these structures are the gametangia. Like angia. So remember the angia designation. What comes in front of the angia is where whatever this is made and stored. So the gametangia is where the gametes are made and stored. So in the male gametangia, this is called the antheridia. Again, this is just review. In the female, it's the archegonia. Okay, let's zoom in on these guys. So in the female, you've got these fleshy fingers. At the base of the fingers are these little pouches that have eggs in them. That's where the eggs are made, stored. In the male, this cross section of this like landing pad, you have these kind of collections of a bunch of sperm, the antheridia, right? Lots of sperm, lots of sperm. In their shape, kind of reflects their purpose, right? You have the landing pad right here. Water will land on the landing pad and it'll kind of wash these sperm out. The sperm will swim. Remember, all these plants that we talked about last week, they all have flagellated sperm. So all of them require water for the sperm to swim to the egg. So it's still dependent on water for reproduction. The sperm will swim to the eggs in the archegonia, and they'll fertilize them. Now you get a zygote, and the zygote will grow, 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 grow. And this ends up turning into the sporophyte. This is the mature sporophyte, the 2N. And remember, it's just attached to the female gametophyte. It relies on the whole female gametophyte for its nutrients and water. And inside the sporophyte, you'll meose and make spores. Those spores will land in a nice damp place, germinate, and grow up into a new thallus, or also known as gametophyte. And the circle of life continues. Beautiful, right? Okie dokie. So, quick overview of liverworts. Now let's go into mosses real quick. Very similar in their life cycle. As you would expect, they're both seedless, non-vascular plants. Think about mosses. So each one of these plants, right, can be male or female. And at the tips of these plants are where the archegonia and antheridia are. And if you remember the slides that we looked at, the females, again, you got the eggs stored away in these bundles of cells. And in the males, again, you have the antheridia with the packages of sperm open to the environment. Again, washed away, they'll find the female eggs, then develop zygote, it'll grow into a sporophyte. And remember, in the female plants, you'll see these long tubes that come out at the top of the female gametophytes. These are the sporophytes, at the end of which are these capsules. These capsules are the blank angia, right? This is a sporophyte, so it makes spores. This is a spore angia. This is where the spores are made and kept, and eventually, when they dry out and turn brown, like we looked at in lab, they'll break open and release a bunch of spores. Remember, those spores will break open and germinate, and I think this is true in both. This terminology is true in both the mosses and the liverworts. What comes out is the protonema. If you remember on the slides, it's just this green mass of tangled stuff, which you can consider as a juvenile gametophyte, because it'll grow into an adult gametophyte. Really, I think that's as much as you need to know about the mosses and the liverworts. Again, pretty easy to identify. Like, we know what the mosses look like. We know what the liverworts look like. Very easy to identify. The basic biology is all on those slides. Just review those things. You'll be good to go. Last thing I might want to add is, oh yeah, so, right, we do have these male and female individual plants in the mosses, and I think in some of the liverworts too, at least in the ones that we've looked at. These, we have a term later on called heterospory, right, where you get male and female gametophytes that germinate from these different spores, a male spore and a female spore. This is not happening in these mosses, right? These male and female plants are actually coming out of and germinating from the same kinds of spores. Not really sure on what environmental cues causes them to diversify into male and female plants, but that's out of the scope of this class. Just remember, heterospory is not in play right now. We'll get into that later in the seedless vascular plants, but not now. Okay, so I think that wraps up this video. I'm going to try to time the closing of both the screen capture and my voice. 3, 2, 1, stop.